Good evening. My name is Ben Southall, founder of Best Life Adventures. This week on Wild Chats, we are diving deep into the wonderfully weird world of the gentleman next to me, Beau Miles. He's an adventurer, he's a filmmaker, he's a backyard philosopher, and he's the man who kayaked to work just to make a point. From running a marathon every day for 42 days to eating nothing but beans for over a month, Beau redefines what it means to explore. If you want to know a bit more about the man behind this madness, the lessons that are hiding there in the mundane, and why we don't need to travel too far to find real adventure, whether you're planning your next trek or just need a spark to shake you up and get you out of the routine, this one is most definitely for you. So for the next hour, I'm going to be unwrapping the world of Beau Miles, who is a pretty well-known adventurer in the Australian space, but now internationally as well. Good evening, Beau. Welcome to the show.
Hello, mate. How are you?
Really damn good, actually. For the first time, I think, on one of these World Chats, I've actually put a hoodie on tonight. It's Queensland. It's dropped to 16 degrees, which sort of registers as semi-cold. And there's you rugged up. Where are you
You
tonight?
poor beggar. I'm in the laundry. I'm in the laundry, and it's proper cold here. And when I say proper cold, that's an insult to the Northern Hemisphere. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
or the Hobartians below us. But I don't know. It'll get down to 7 or 8 tonight, which is nippy for the onset of winter. I kind of like it. I like the time of year when you put on down. I think welcome,
So
welcome back.
much.
Yeah,
So
it's
much.
nice.
It sits
It's
in my
good.
wardrobe and it sits in my cupboard for all of the months of the year in Queensland until I have to pack it and go on an adventure. So all of the gear that I have, the really nice gear that we need to have, the old-fashioned jackets, the boots that really feel good, but your toes are almost poking out the end. They only come out on those special occasions. I have to ask you, that isn't the shadow of a noose off to your left-hand
It
side,
does
is it?
look it, doesn't it? No,
Bloody
that's
hell.
that's mate, that's a bit of an artifact there. That's the strap of my computer bag for when I used to be an academic and I used to have elbow patches and wear, tweed jackets. Yeah, that was but no, I was marched into an office in November 2019 and told I didn't have a job anymore, and then I put it up there and I haven't looked back.
Well, I don't know. People tell me I don't have a job. It's a passion. It's a lifestyle. It's something you sort of forge and create because you're so energetic about it. What do you describe your job as these days?
I get asked that question a lot, and it's good because I have to reflect on then what the hell it is I do. I struggle sometimes to say exactly what it is, which is a worry, but then kind of exciting too because I feel like I'm a poor man's polymath. I do 10 things, but look, I'd say to be a bit cliche, I'm probably just a storyteller these days, and I try and weave that into whatever the heck I'm doing, whether I'm writing something or making a film or giving a talk. But look, my day job, Monday to Friday, is pretty much making films. When I do have small chunks of time off, I'm writing a book. So I've almost finished my second book. That's not far off. So I don't know, a bit of a writer, filmmaker, but YouTube is where most of my energies go. And I say YouTube now rather than filmmaking because it's a beast and it's a different
Yeah.
kind of art form, YouTube. And there's lots I like about it, and I'm still in that space. So just trying to churn out a film every 21 days. That's it.
You've evolved your mediums, really, haven't you? Because I mean, same as me, way back in the sort of late 2000s, I was traveling, and my first medium for putting in creating output and talking to a world and who was listening was just writing, was a blog, was really using an electronic journal. Is that how you started your storytelling that way?
I very much started long form. So I wanted to be an adventure hero from the age of sort of 20. And when I say hero, I say that loosely because I never wanted to be an all-conquering Everest mountaineer for 30 years or a rower that paddles or rows every ocean and large
Yeah.
crossing. I never had that desire to be a one thing and an expert at it, or someone who was a real uh, you know the a person that's sort of on the tip of your tongue if you think of that thing. I never wanted to be that person. um, but I did fundamentally want to be a filmmaker from a pretty early stage. So about the age of 20 year, I went off and started to do sort of long form films, and they were crap for 10 years before I started to learn my craft. And then they've merged together, filmmaking and action or adventure, and they've got this sort of bowish hybrid now that I sort of call my own brand of it, which is basically just a plagiarized version of what what I see all around the world, and where I'm inspired. So, yeah, I think I'm a bit of a I hate to say, a bit of a journeyman in this whole storytelling game. I'm not quite sure where it fits.
Got to say, but you're doing it really well, and I mean that genuinely and honestly, because it's pure. It's from the heart. It's not doesn't sound scripted. It just sounds like you've got that sort of that comedy brain inside that likes to use language as much as your hands, as much as the art of adventure to storytell. So you're doing it magically at the moment. I want to know
Yeah,
about
thanks, Ben.
I
Yeah.
want to know about your inspiring heroes though, because I never rode in Australia in 2009, and people tell me about in the olden days of watching TV, they'd sit and watch the Lehman Brothers or Albie Mangle and all these sort of archaic Australian heroes. Who were the people that you sort of looked at as a young storyteller?
Uh, you know, the whole inspiration. I can say categorically, I'm not overly inspired, but when it does land, and it lands in the strangest of circumstances, I never really go searching for inspiration. I'd never be the kind of person that buys a book to be inspired or reads a self-help book as such.
Yeah,
It always comes in small glimmers or accidents or almost serendipitous, where a song will hit when you're stuffed after a run, or you're having a beer and the bloody sun sets in a particular way, and you think, you know what, you get an idea. But look, if I'm to give you some people, I have loved feature films my whole life, like most people really, but I really was quite sensitive to them. And so, there's Sophia Coppola of the world who makes Lost in Translation, or Wes Anderson who makes super quirky, stylized films, or the John Krakauer's book on the Everest disaster,
yeah.
1996. Those kind of emotive stories, and all quite different in different genres. I take lots from these different places, and I would say that most of my influences do not come from the adventure space or from the travel space. They come from humans, or a bloody big tree when it's blowing a gale. I can get a whole punch of stuff from weird angles, and so I'm hard to pin down on the inspiration stakes, other than to say it happens often enough and in weird ways.
I think that's you sort of wrapped it up pretty well. Just having watched before, even I knew we were going to have a chat. I've watched end to end most of the things. I've seen my little 7-year-old son Atlas a few of the YouTube videos and things, and it's good to sit down and when a kid's got attention to detail and they're concentrating and they're listening and they're watching, there's something special about the way that you can do it. Your passion for using your hands for creating and crafting things, it's something that in a way it doesn't inspire me, but I aspire to do that sort of stuff. Even making a platform for my beehives at the weekend. I was sitting there trying to work it out and using your head. The micro engineer, my background's engineering, the engineer brain, when you can engage that and you can use that, you feel like you're sort of in your flow, you're in your Zen moments. Your shed, like mine, your space is very much where you have spent a lot of time through your storytelling. Is that was it an education that you came through? Was it through university? Was it through college? How did you learn the art of the sort of the woodmanship?
I mean, I learned to build things through my dad, and then my sister's first boyfriend, and then just a natural interest. I've always loved building stuff and
Yeah.
stealing dad's nails, and just banging them into trees and old wood, and just learning on the go. Grew up on acreage, so everything that I was surrounded by, dad made. And in the end, when dad kind of trusted me enough, I built a shed. I built a shed when I was like 14. A double tractor shed essentially.
Yeah.
And geez, that was empowering. And I think about that stuff now. Think, gee, and I enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed it. It wasn't work. And in fact, it kind of set the tone. I've never done a job I didn't like. And even when I didn't love it, I didn't loathe it. I always would be happy to turn up. I really like work and different kinds of work. So there's always something that can interest me if I'm there in the first place. And so building very much interests me. If I can see the skeleton of a building, I can repeat it. I can go and build it because
Yeah.
it's shown me its internal natures. And then you've just got to go and learn how to do that kind of scarf joint, or some sort of join, and otherwise it's all pretty obvious. And so the actual built world, I sort of get, but I think I only get it because I was around it at a young age when it
Mm.
was handed over to me. So I thank dad for that one.
So you got that side of you and your soul and your psyche that is the craftsman, the engineer. The other side then is the one that likes to get out and be immersed in nature, but also to do things that are now endurance based. But were they then just about going out into the great outdoors and exploring? Was it family? It was the motivation.
Yeah, I think so, mate. I think Dad certainly bred in me a natural curiosity, whereas Mum bred in me a deep love for nature. Dad has a love of nature too, and my other family members, but Mum was really, as a gardener, I remember her pruning a tree once, and she was so delicate and yet very decisive. She's like, good surgeons are decisive. And Mum was a really decisive gardener because of her knowledge of it, but because of her deep love of it too. She knew that a bloody heavy pruning on a rose bush or a apricot tree was exactly what it was good for it. It would create longevity and health. And same as with a big long run or a paddle. But you're dead right. I never went paddling or running in the first place to be a great endurance athlete. And in fact, I'm only doing that now because I feel like it's going to serve me well for these middle adventure years in a sense. And I love the grind. And it's, to be honest, it's the only time I'm alone. So
Yeah,
endurance
yeah.
is kind of where it's at.
You have most of those conversations inside your own head in those endurance spaces, and you now obviously stand up on stage and talk to people and broadcast yourself across YouTube. So it's a very different space where I suppose you can get away from everything else and just listen to the internal voices of Beau Miles.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's kind of a shock. I must admit, Ben, it's a shock. I know you've got kids too. Atlas is 7. My daughter's May's 5, and my youngest is almost 3. Um, I'm virtually, unless I'm doing kid drop off or I go for a run, I'm never alone. I'm either in a studio with someone else, I'm in a car with someone else, I'm in a little house with someone else. And even when you're not talking, it's shared space. And so running's very attractive to me at this stage because it's simpler than going for a paddle.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can be out the door in a minute, and so I get this instant hit of just my own head, and that's where the creativity comes from.
Absolutely. I amen to that. That is exactly the same for me. I'm full time solo parenting at the moment. And I don't have that freedom of space and that clarity of thought because work is there. There's always the ping of something. Every time I go for a run now, the phone is left in the car or the phone is left at home because it's your absolute time where no one else can disturb you. And you just got the endorphins and the dopamine hit comes from that space.
Yep, sacred stuff. No, that's right, mate, and it's and we need it. And look, um, I'm in a phase of life too, whereas I spend more time in communication with people I'll probably never see again, or that aren't close to me, rather than the 5 people I want to be spending time with. So I've really got to remap that, and that's the challenge of middle life, is that we often get distracted with everything around us that would, it's a necessity in some respects, but gee, I don't see my best mates enough. I just don't. And so that's a conundrum I've got to work through.
Um, Going to your sort of early days of your what were posed as sort of solo adventures. The affinity to me is the African continent. I've spent a good bit of time exploring there, but having seen that YouTube video you created of the kayak, was that the first real bow adventure that you'd sort of tried to document, or were there ones that led up to that?
There were a couple that led up to, but not to that capacity. That took 4 years of kind of planning and getting my ducks in a row and getting enough money to take 6 months off life,
Mm,
and kind of getting the balls to do it in a sense too. I was scared for a couple of years there of the idea until it became a reality, and the excitement sort of kicked in, and it was good nervousness rather than fear. Um, but yeah, that was full blown, and I probably say I'll never go do something like that again in terms of its time frame. Spending
mm.
6 months on expedition, that's a huge chunk of time.
Is it?
And I don't know whether I'd do well with 6 months without a family hit these
Yeah,
days. And
yeah.
so I'd very much reinvent adventures around those kind of bigger expeditions.
The similarity I had to that moment where you realised your best mate, who you'd planned the trip with, wasn't coming. That this car, when I had my first big adventure, it was a year driving around Africa. I'd planned it for 3 years. I'd saved the money. Me and my best mate Owen had dreamt about everything, and then 2 weeks before we were due to go, he said he couldn't come. And that moment that you talk about in your kayaking one, where suddenly they didn't come, but you've got someone else to fill the space, that resonated with me so much. It was like, yeah, about to go and do something that you've got your best mate to go and do with you, and you're going to share the load, you're going to share the pain, you're going to decision make together. Then all of a sudden, that carpet is whipped out away from you. That must have been hard to sort of replace that person in those early days.
it sucked because exactly like you said, you've got this reliable thing, uh, and as much as I'd kind of planned the trip and had cobbled it all together and was sort of the driving force behind the idea, I knew that a real big piece of the puzzle to make me comfortable to start was having that good friend along. And it sort of derailed my brain for a couple of weeks before, I got this sort of backup bloke that came along, and he was a godsend in the end because he was a real marine head. He was a sailor, bloody
Yeah.
typical Kiwi, hard as
Yeah.
nails, and knew how to read the sea better than me in many
Yeah.
respects. I had the paddling background, but he had this going to sea background, and geez, it was bloody handy and invaluable. And I'm glad that happened because I don't know whether my mum would have let me go. Otherwise, it would have fortified the airport. But it can derail your thinking for sure.
With these big trips, we always look at the end and the finish line and everything else. But that one, you took a sort of big decision just to say, okay, I was planning a 4,000 kilometer journey, and it ended up being 2,000. What happened? What sort of cut that one short? And obviously, you sort of grew a lot out of the back of that.
Yeah, look, there was a whole bunch going on. I could have continued in many respects, but I was at that stage. I'd been away or on expedition for 5 months. I'd got to Cape Town, but I had to take a chunk out near the Cedarburg Mountains or along the big long section of coast just south of Durban.
The
Uh,
Wild Coast.
yeah, wild coast, super unlandable and super hard for support, and the waves were getting big. Then I was entering winter. Um, So things, and fundamentally too, you think, oh, 5 months, that's plenty of time to paddle around a big chunk of coast. And it kind of was, but I was still only averaging 4 days a week with weather or
Mm.
having to get visas or finding water. Sometimes it took me 2 days just to find water. And so logistically, it was really tough. And I was in love with three women at the time, and I was broke, and I had tendonitis in the right arm, and I was
Yeah.
kind of a broken man, and so I had to just go home and lick my wounds and figure out what it all meant. So yeah, that's where that one ended.
The build up to that one, I read a wonderful book called "Keep Australia to Your Left," which
Yeah.
was about the two guys that attempted to paddle around, circumnavigate Australia, and one was a New York model, and one was the Kepler shop supplier in New York, and they just happened to meet up and did this journey, and just the idea of them coming ashore on these dangerous surf-ridden coastlines. I know that Transkei Coast, that Wild Coast in South Africa, and just to even think about going and doing that, was it the two of you the whole way during that part of the journey?
No, it was the first half, I suppose, of the first 8 weeks was with Jared, this Kiwi bloke, and then he got malaria. And so he got shipped out and he flew back to London and recovered for 6 or 8 weeks.
Wow.
I went on alone, and that was where it really shifted. I had this great camaraderie, good bloke,
Mm.
two sets of eyes on every problem we had, and it was down to one eye or one set of eyes and aloneness. And I must admit that it was twofold. One, after he left, I fell in love with solo travel, like genuine. Okay, you're by yourself. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Um, and and then when he came back, it was very much, oh golly, I've now got to reshare this trip, and I don't probably need the help as much anymore. You've got to then go at someone else's pace as well as.
Mm.
So the compromises were more when he came back, even though it was great to have him back. So it really changed the dynamic of the trip, and uh, mostly my fault in a sense. I became just a different expeditionary beast to what I started with.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
no
Learned
longer a
so
shared
much.
expedition. So yeah, he did probably over a half in the end, but by the time he came back, the wheels were starting to come off in many respects.
Looking back now, I mean, like we all do, we look pretty young in those videos, those early ones, don't we? You were filming everything there and then bringing it home and editing it. Is that sort of the thing? You'd had some pretty custom made equipment on the front of the kayak to sort of house the cameras and stuff. Was that before there was any financials in YouTube? It was just about the love of filmmaking.
Yeah, well, that was pre-YouTube. YouTube didn't even exist
Ah,
then, so
wow.
it was a figment of someone's imagination, and so I cut down versions of this, and it made it to resort television in the US, and made it small versions, made it to Australian TV and bits and bobs. But fundamentally, I just toured that in cinemas.
Yeah.
Did a tour of Australia similar to what I do now. But no, amazingly, Ben, that was still on tape stock, digital 8 mil tape stock, and I just
Brilliant.
sent them back in the post. And so
Wow.
I wouldn't in my wildest dreams send my raw
The
single
risk,
copy.
yeah.
The risk, bloody Christmas cards go missing, let alone your entire expedition. So yeah, I just sent them back to a post to an editor that I was employing per hour back in Australia, and he'd do some rough cuts, and that's how I did it. It was yeah, and that's the flaw of the film too. It was too bow centric, and I wasn't a good enough shot maker.
It comes to mind straight away, though. I know now, and you know now exactly how you would charge gear and the batteries you need and all that sort of stuff. It was very, very raw and amateur in a way in those days because how were you making sure, so which year did you do that one?
That was 2007.
2007. So again, you don't have solar panels on the deck of the kayak. How are you bringing everything ashore in Africa, getting it charged, looking after your gear? It must have been a very suck it and see and learn in the spur of the moment.
It was, but it was also very methodical in a sense that I'd paddle from whenever I could get on the water, probably
Mm.
half an hour after first light to probably, this is for the Mozambique section and the top of South Africa. So for the first 2 months, very predictable weather. I'd paddle to 1, 2 o'clock maybe until the trade winds kicked in and it was blowing in your face. And by then you want to get off the water anyway. I'd get on the beach, get dumped by a shore break. I did have a
Pick up your
tiny little,
pieces.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, basically just condemn yourself to getting crash landing. I did have a small solar panel, and that was vital, and that charged the odd battery and my sat phone, and they were the two things that are kind of my
Mm.
lifelines. One to record the journey, and one to call things if things went down. But I shot to edit, and that was the flaw of the film. I'd only turn the
Yeah.
camera on when there was action, and that's not where you make films. You've got to let
Mm.
the camera roll for that stuff, and so that was its flaw.
Um, Knowing some of that coastline, it's pretty raw, it's pretty wild, it's pretty open. Did you ever feel like you needed to flick that cover on the sat phone and fire up for some help? Will you get into those moments ever?
No, I never did in a sense. I always thought that the folly of, I think, modern day adventuring in some respects, and I have to be careful here because, I'll be doing some stuff in the next few years where I will very much rely on the systems of rescue around me.
Mm.
And I'm always cautious of that because I'm not a control freak uh, with many things, and yet I do really want to be quite independent whenever I make the decision to do these things, and or it's my brother-in-law helping me, or a mate down the road, or a cameraman, rather than pulling the trigger on the Navy coming to find
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
So I never got to that point there. I did get help in the end down in Still Bay, uh, but that was kind of arranged as well. We'd had breakfast with them that morning, and they said, "Look, we're up for a training run. If it all goes pear shaped, we'll come get you."
That's
And
nice.
we bought
That's
them
a good
dinner that
backup.
night. Yeah, we bought them dinner that night and paid for outboard fuel. So we kind of covered our tracks. But I'd be nervous to do that stuff again in some respects.
What were you paddling? I'm always curious about gear. I could get stuck on the kayaking stuff because I love being on the water as well. But what were you using? Had you tried and tested this kayak before, or was it something you brought
Um,
over there?
no, very much so. I'd very much tried the pull apart kayak, but the rest of the gear, mate, I'm still quite a luddite with gear. If it kind
Mm.
of works, I'll just go with it. There's a better version of everything I have in the shed. I'm sort of just, if it works and it's rough and ready. The beauty of that particular boat too, is it just took a hammering. It took a really good beating,
Yeah,
and was sort of fixable. You couldn't do it with fancier, faster boats because you wouldn't be able to repair it
break it.
as you
Yeah.
go. Yeah, I was busting rudders and deck lines and cockpits every other day. So yeah, it was pretty good, but pretty crude too. I used a bloody $90 paddle, and my PFD had crap pockets in it, and my CAG was leaking, and it was split after 2 weeks. My stuff was actually pretty shit, but it kind of fit the bill because I was pretty, I was doing it on the smell of an oily rag, really.
But it's nice in a way being green to it and having all these things. That's what we always talk about with adventure. No one talks about, when I talk about overland journeys, no one talks about the 2,000 kilometers of straight tarmac. It's always about the bits where things go wrong and you've got to use your intuition or your knowledge or talk to the locals, and some of the times in Africa, the most potential, as people see it, dangerous parts is when you're interacting with humans. But if you've got the time, the personality, the smile, the handshake, you can talk to humans. They sit on the side of you, they help you with the repairs, they wave goodbye, and you have dinner with the family. And it's the beauty of that sort of raw travel.
Yeah, that's an excellent summary because I would rather, and in fact, I didn't have pumps. People can't believe that I didn't have emergency pumps with me.
Bilge
You
pumps.
know, I didn't have a bilge pump with me. You know, in the end, I didn't have. I finished the trip with a pair of Crocs, no underpants, one pair of shorts, one shirt, and half a book. You know, I
They
just
must have smelled so good.
oh mate, it was a séance. Yeah, I had to say, yeah, it was bad. But in terms of, you couldn't get a better methodology and expedition to whittle down what you actually need in life, and you're right in a sense that if you just go on that the proviso that other humans are there and it's transactional, and yeah, you would help pay them, or I would do some gardening, or I just sat and drank tea with a woman for one day because she was lonely, and it was great. I needed a rest, and she wanted to have a yarn, and it was the perfect transaction, and those kind of things. And that didn't make it into the film as much as what it should have.
Yeah.
But yeah, the expedition, that's what they thrive on, that sort of stuff.
In a way, sometimes I suppose it almost dissolves the beauty of the moment. If you are always looking through a viewfinder, and we're so guilty of it these days, you look at any concert today and you look at everybody with their phone up and they're not actually there absorbing it in the moment. If you had that moment with that lady, having that cup of tea, and you wanted to rig up two or three cameras to get the shot, it probably would have lost the purity of that time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that I get asked that question probably more than anything of how much does the filmmaking experience ruin the expedition or ruin the physical pursuit? Or, when you go for a run, you want to be untethered, like you leaving your phone in the car. And that's a really existential feel. It's very hard to describe why it means so much to us because we're online 23 bloody hours a day, and that hour is very important to us. And when you cheapen that 1 hour by making a film out of it or taking a camera with you, you don't get that reprieve. Um, However, I mean, I still probably only shoot 40 days a year. People think I'm shooting 300 days a year, and so I know that when I'm going out with a camera, I've got to go for it and be both this filmmaker doing whatever it is you're doing because I know the rest of the time I'll leave it at home.
Are you a filmmaker, just to do a segue, are you a filmmaker that sort of tries, are you sort of the one shot wonder that can just go through and roll the whole thing and someone yourself is there capturing it? Or you're resetting, are you doing different angles? Because we all know what it's like. The real world of television production isn't quite often what's happening at the time.
Well, I've done, yeah, I've definitely evolved with who I've worked with, and my key filmmaking ally now, a younger bloke I used to teach actually, he produced a film for one of his final assignments, and I said, oh mate, you should come out and help me film one day, and now we're in business partnership.
Mm.
So him and I make films very differently to how I did 20 years ago. But the biggest eye opener for me is making two TV shows in the last 6 or 8 months, which will come out shortly, and that's been I am staggered at how at 20 people on set and someone's dragging around a toilet with and someone's exclusively on food. you know all these things that if I need to
Imagine
take a
towing
dump.
that in a kayak down the east coast of Africa, would you?
And you know what those things do too, it makes for a somewhat pleasant shooting experience, but it is so stop start, there is no flow at all, and you have to. I don't know how Bear Grylls does it. I don't know how you do it half the time when um, you have to almost, yeah, manifest something that is A to B, and it's just not like that when there's a
Uh,
big crew around. So I kind of resist that, and I love going back to a smaller crew or just by myself. It's liberating.
So you finish a kayak trip. Is it sort of the end of in your mind, sort of the adventure life, or you've sort of got other things on the in the pipeline? You're heading back to Australia, or because hang on, you were in New York with the kayak on the subway, and then you head off and go and do the adventure. Where do you then sort of end up after Africa?
So after Africa, I kind of was licked my wounds for a couple of years and just
Mm.
drank lots of beer and thought, oh, what's kind of next in a sense. And I knew I had a big box full of footage to make something out of. I knew there was a story in there somewhere, but I didn't quite know where to start. And I did worry that it was a bit fluff and not enough drama and, not enough impact really. And so anyway, for 2 years, I just sort of floated about wondering what the hell to do and did all sorts of odd jobs. I was working seasonally in the US for 10 years during that stretch of time, very much seasonal in my work approach. I'd do 3 months of one thing and 3 months of another, guiding kayaking here and then school teaching here, or then going off and building barns there. And I really liked that. but I did get to the point, like a lot of young people, that you just get sick of living out of a bag.
Mm.
I'd started my master's then, so I'd gone back to study to sort of scratch the itch of maybe writing a PhD down the track, and then that I hooked into the kind of academic world and liked it. I liked teaching 20-year-olds. So that was a real best job I've ever had in some respects. Going on expedition with 20-year-olds,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
kept me young for 10 years before that ended, and I've gone back to filmmaking. But running started to sort of take over from kayaking the busier I got, simply because it was more time efficient.
You can fit it in, absolutely.
Yeah, you
Yeah, you
just
can.
fit it in, and it's about bang for buck when you're ambitious. And I was never ambitious until after Africa, and then it bit hard to maximize life, and that's kind of where I'm at.
Were you pretty much a single man at that stage, and you were sort of traveling and doing what you needed to do? Because then once you sort of settle into family and then you bring children into the world, it just changes the way and the timing that you can do things and what means the most.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a partner, long-term partner, for most of that. Leanne, great girl. She was British though, so we'd still only see each other half the time.
Mm.
And so I was kind of, you know, in some respects that was brilliant, because I could bugger off for 6 months and not worry about either love life or someone at home pining for you, because they're in the opposite side of the world anyway. And so we did the long distance thing for a while, but ultimately that was kind of failed as well. Someone's always got to make the sacrifice for family. And then I was single for a bunch of years and lived like a mongrel dog. And that was probably a really good thing too, before I found Helen and then this new version of Beau doing stuff.
How did you meet?
I did the opposite to what I've ever, George Costanza, when he does everything opposite for a while there, he tells people he lives with his parents and he orders chicken instead of tuna. And I kind of did that and went online. And so I went online when it was still a bit edgy, and when,
Yeah,
oh, you went
yeah.
on. So this was 12 years ago, and I used to drink a bit of wine back then, and I mean, I bloody love wine. I just don't drink enough of it nowadays. But I drank a bottle of wine with my dad, and I signed up to eHarmony with the most exclusive package. That, like bloody Walter Mitty.
I love it.
I got a personal person on the end of the phone, that I talk to
Yeah,
every other week,
yeah. The service
and
engineer.
met Helen. Yeah, yeah, it was brilliant. It
That is
was.
the opposite of the answer I was expecting.
Uh,
Genuinely, I've done no
Well,
background research into that.
I'd met women on, in film festivals or on the bank of a river somewhere or in a
Mm,
bar up a bloody mountain. I don't have a problem meeting people, but the trouble is, I just wanted to do something a little different, and
yeah.
it was kind of fascinating, and it was exciting too, because, man, if you've got half a brain and you go on those dating sites, it's wow, you can meet women from all walks of
Oh,
life, and it was really fun. It was really fun.
it cuts the time down as well because it means the filter has been done already. You save on the waffle, you save on the bar talk, and find out if they actually like what you like doing at the weekends, and saves that. I mean, I'm separated and I'm going through that stage right now. How do I find the next person that I want to share their world, and hopefully maybe they want to be part of mine? So who knows? eHarmony it is.
Oh, mate, yeah, I kind of secretly wanted to be their poster child, because it was such a good experience for me. I found it brilliant, and yeah,
Amazing.
and yeah, super fun. And you're dead right. You basically start on date six. You know
Yes.
enough about each other's worldview, and how they present themselves. Helen, for example, she is gorgeous. She's like a bloody 10, and yet her photos was just her out doing stuff.
Yeah.
She
Even
was
better.
going hiking, and she was going on picnics, and she was in a garden, and it was so, the ego was left at home. It was pre-selfie. It was very endearing.
Amazing. So next adventures for you, after you've done the kayak stuff, you start to engage the legs, the lower body's kicking in a bit more. Did you sort of have an idea that you wanted to do, or how do the next ones come about when you start to look at your projects?
I must admit, I am a real hand-to-mouth, opportunistic storyteller, because I'm so fascinated by most walks of life.
Mm,
And so, which is my own vice too. It's a real vice, because I have these wonderful projects off in the ether that I know are really good projects, kind of viral projects that both interest me and I think will interest a big audience. But they're
mm,
also tricky. They've got lots of arms and legs. You've got to nail it. You've got to be a particular kind of beast for a week or two or a month to really get a good job out of it. So I tend to default to things that are lower hanging fruit, which is the pressure of YouTube as well.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, yeah, I have a whole bunch. I have like 200 scripts. It's probably close to 200 scripts, and they're all anywhere between one paragraph and a page long, and they're a really tight synopsis or just a very simple idea. And that kind of maps. I just look at that with the seasons and where I'm at and where I want to do that or who it involves, and I just kind of just keep chipping away at those scripts, and they become a YouTube film.
And so the lead time for something like that, is that, is that a week down the line, a month down the line? Or can it sit on that wall or that post-it note until it is grey and shriveled, that post-it note, and it's 3 years and you go, shit, we need to do that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of them are 10 years old in there, some scripts, and some of them
Wow.
are a week old and the action at the following week based on availability or the sun's out or, someone's dropped off a car that's perfect for the whatever. And, if someone sends you an email, Hamish Blake, a very well-known Australian, when he emailed me and said, let's go, let's catch up. And I said, well, let's catch up, but let's do it as an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And then something grew out of it. You just do that and everything else gets shelved. And then it's hierarchical of what you take up next. And so I've tended to do that for the last 5 or 6 years. It's just trying to get shit done. And I think I'm interested in sort of 8 out of 10 things. And there's two others always in there that you're just doing to make ends meet. And it kind of disappoints me that that's the case. But it is what it is.
A mile an hour was a great concept because everyone is sort of trying to go faster, or there's FKT sites, fastest known times, and I've done it with less oxygen and all this sort of stuff. The idea of
Yeah.
sort of winding back and just going back to the basics of, I'm going to do the distance I said I'm going to do, but I'm going to make it enjoyable and engaging and do other things on the way. I mean, that to me, that is one of the most beautifully crafted, well thought out adventures that you've done. How did you sort of come about with the idea and start to fill the pockets over those hours?
Yeah, thanks. Well, it's funny that you mentioned that that's a well-crafted adventure. I struggle to think that that's an adventure sometimes. I think it's just some bloke that wanted to get a bit of stuff done in his
Waffling.
shed, and then he goes for a run every hour. And I must admit, Jerry, to use another Seinfeld quote, Jerry Seinfeld once said that he knew he was onto something with Seinfeld when the great majority of NBC thought it was, what is the story here? It really is a story about nothing. And he knew he was onto it because of all of the sort of kickback he got for it. And I must admit, I didn't know that with a mile an hour. It's been my most successful idea.
Yeah.
But half the crew, and it was only four of us, but I know a really great friend of mine, Chris, who did a lot of the action shots for that. He was really unsold on the idea. He was just, I think, just loyal to me and happy to be paid for a day rate. But he thought it was a crummy idea. Um, and so it was total fly by the seat of your pants thing, but it was totally genuine too, Ben. And I have to trust myself with this stuff more often because it felt right. It felt like fun. And I thought, you
Mm.
know what? I'm just going to go and have what it was fun. And I have to have more fun in these things because if it's fun for me, it translates. And that's, I think, gold dust. And so, yeah, it's all about making things fun and transferable, I think, to the audience.
I think the quirkiness of the concept, I think the way that you can verbalize the story, the way that you can engage people and bring them into the moments, whatever they are, whether it's, crushing up flower pots or fixing the raft or whatever the elements are within that story. I think the melding together of those ideas is what does it. I know Chris Orr pretty well actually. So knowing Chris and how he'd probably take on something like that, he's a honed athlete. He's a super good looking human. He does everything so bloody damn well. So to see the mess of a concept in a way like that, I can see why it might sort of ruffle him up the wrong way.
Yeah, I don't know whether I realised it in the moment or whether it was in the aftermath when Chris said, "Yeah, I didn't think that was a very good idea." And I've been, which is it's worked out great for me because I just say to him, "Hey, Chris, look, not all of my ideas are great, but some of the ones you don't think are great work out all right. So just trust
Just
me."
look at the numbers.
Yes, mate. Yeah, yeah.
Sustainability is a big part of your storytelling, of your journeys, the way that you sort of use human power, but also the way you recycle and repurpose. Explain some of that because obviously that's a massive thread for what you do.
Yeah, that just comes back to my parents. my dad and mum grew up pretty poor, big families. And when I say poor, mum particularly, she didn't have shoes till she was 8 or 10 or something, and they were a real sort of hand to mouth family. Dad similar, but classic, just baby boomer kids doing their thing.
Mm.
Um, there was just no waste in our household. There was just zero waste. The porridge would either be eaten entirely or it would go into something that afternoon. The bloody chickens, they got a banana peel at best. So uh, I've taken I've taken that through. I don't. I'm unshakable with that now in some respects on my own turf. Unfortunately, I make compromises when I leave home. You
Mm.
know, uh, if I sit at dinner tables now with people at nice restaurants and I see all their food that doesn't get eaten, I don't say anything anymore. Whereas
Mm.
at home, that doesn't happen. And if I was with my close friends, I'd be bloody taking that in a doggy bag for sure. So, it's about now where I make my compromises with my hand to mouth ethic and not wanting to, waste that perfectly good nail or that perfectly good piece of timber because there's a lot of you got to dedicate yourself to be hardcore in a sense, and you have to pick your moments. And so I do it with films now, and where I can do it in small pockets.
It's good, I think, because you don't force feed it. A lot of people, have the climate change and the recycle almost forced down their throats to the point of resistance. So just to integrate it and make it part of the web of the storytelling that you do sows the seed in people's heads. I mean, I even today, I'm just about to put into my house here a single stringer set of steps. I mean, it's one that I found in the scrapyard in Mawillenbar. I've been looking for one on Facebook Marketplace for 5 years. I finally found it, drove over the border to Mawillenbar, brought it back on a trailer, chopped it up, welded it together, and now I'm looking for the treads. And I'm like, well, I can look on Facebook Marketplace and I can find these treads. During the cyclone we had a month ago here, there's a massive, massive gum tree that is down across the road. They've chopped it, the road goes through the middle again, but on each side they've got these huge, big, round piles of wood. And I'm thinking to myself, that would be a nice story. I don't need something that's been bought in Brisbane or someone from Sydney's put it up on a truck. If I can get down there, get some of this, I've got a guy up the road who's got one of these amazing, the machines that they bring in and do it themselves, kill and fire it. That comes off the property. That's the sort of thing that you've sown in my head that's made me think differently about the way I want to engage with the world.
Yeah, well, that's terrific, mate. And that's a story. It's not only is it a story, but it's super satisfying. And I still find myself amazed at when I built my little cabin for my wife in the paddock, and I did this during lockdown in COVID, and I just did it with whatever was on the property, and there was constant resistance even from myself when I was building it that this thing's looking funky, nothing's going to match, it's all a bit not quite right, and yet when you finish it and it looks all not quite right, it actually looks twice as good, it's better.
Yeah.
So it was more work to do, but the reward was exceptional. And you know this, and your story there of using the local gum tree that fell over for your treads on you. I mean, that's fantastic. But it's a pain in the ass.
Yes,
You're going
it
to
will be a
spend.
pain in the
It's
arse, I
it's
know.
a total pain in the ass, but you just have to weigh up if it's worth that pain in the ass, and that's where we're at. And it's where you spend that pain in the ass time because it's always going to be worth it.
I think one of the stories that you've told as well, one of the films that you've made that sort of shocked me in a way. I've traveled a fair bit of Asia, and you get used to the sort of black, bubbling, polluted river over there. But to go and see the one in Sydney that you sort of paddled up there, I'm going to bring up the name of the movie. What was the name of it? Paddle, not the paddle to work one. Bad River. Bad
Yeah.
River.
Yep.
That just highlighted to me that we live in this wonderful country, God's country of Australia. We have these clean, beautiful beaches, but to go somewhere as inner city as that and find that sort of waste in there, you told the story well in the film, but it was a shock to see that much was happening in Australia, that much pollution.
Yeah, it was a shock to me too. Everything to that point. This is Cooks River in Sydney that goes down via the airport of Sydney. It's been completely diverted since it ran naturally for the airport. It's been diverted, but essentially it's a river that's been turned into a canal. And I got put in at the very first drop of the watershed up on a cricket ground, about 25 kilometres from the sea, and uh, and down I went, and it was 5 or 6 kilometres. It was kind of what you'd expect. It was drainy, but it was healthy-ish. There were reeds about. There were plenty of birds, and I thought, you know what, this, for an urban river that I've heard lots about, this is not so bad. But then But then I hit this constricted point down through this industrial zone, and that's where those images come from. Of I couldn't move through it for the thickness of the rubbish, and the smell was so rancid. It was quite a shock, and I was a bit speechless for some of it, and which I think actually made the experience what it was, because it was like you said, I didn't expect you'd see a river like that. That's sort of the Philippines or India or hugely densely populated places that don't have the bloody bin man once a week like we do. How did we get like that? And so it was a shock.
It's sort of in a way, probably not the subtext, but it's a bit of subliminal messaging just about gear. This is the World Chats on World Earth, and it's all about going into a store and buying the latest gear and the amazing garment technology that gets into it. But you are very much an advocate for the repair, the reuse, the recycle, the build. When it comes to your gear for taking on the elements, what do you do? What's your mantra? What do you love having? You're not a brand man, I don't imagine.
Oh, not really. And yet I respect, I've been with Patagonia now for about a decade, and I really respect, can you imagine going into some of these fast food chains, and they see you're alone, and it might be very rude, but maybe you order a bit too much, and they ask from behind the counter, do you really need that burger, sir? Do you really want the large Coke?
Yeah.
And for Patagonia to have a slogan like, you know, buy less, demand more. That really, I really respect that. And look, Wild Earth has got that
Mm.
kind of kudos as well. I think they're a B Corp, and people in the store would say, "Oh, if we don't have it, they'd send you somewhere else," or they'd say, "Look, buy this good thing you're gonna have in your bloody kit bag for the next 50 years. Don't buy crap that is going to be unrecyclable in three." And I really respect that. My shed at the moment is very much a blend of aging, broken gear, and bug it if I'm going to throw it away.
Yeah,
I'm just not going to.
absolutely.
I'm not going to buy any new stuff. I'm going to repair it. I'm going to force my hand, and so I really like that phase of life where I'm buying a lot less, I'm using a lot less, but I'm repairing more. I'm at that phase.
Mm. When it comes to the kids and getting them involved in the outdoors, is there a resistance to it? Are they loving it? Are they sort of strapped on at every possible opportunity? How does it work with the family now?
Well, I'm ashamed to say, Ben, I have done very little overnight stuff with my daughters. We had a horrid experience when my daughter was 15 months old. We took her up to the Alps, and we slept in a tent with her, and none of us got a wink of sleep, and we all sort of, you know, we
Never
we took we took
again.
a lot of caffeine the next day and thought, oh, what have we done? And so
Yeah.
we've been a bit gun shy, but we went away last weekend,
Yeah.
and it was brilliant. And so
Yeah.
we've broken the shackles, and so I think that it's going to be a watershed moment where we're going to do a lot more. But I can't wait, actually.
Mm.
Our
How
second
was
child
May?
was yeah, May's 5 and
5,
Charlie's
yeah.
3, and
Yeah.
so I think it's guns blazing now. Let's go for it. And yeah, I was a bit of a wuss for the last couple of years, and we've been so busy too. But I think it's game on.
It's interesting when the kids go out there and do it. I'm lucky enough that we live in Currumbin Valley. We don't live down in one of the estates down there. Our neighbours are, 300 metres down the road and 50 metres up the road. So it was not like a cul-de-sac environment. So Atlas still can't ride a bike. He's 7 years old. He doesn't have any intention to ride a bike, but he can sit out here and build a humpy. He sits and watches Alone at the moment. He's loving Australian Alone because the way that you can go out there and build these traps and all this sort of stuff. So slowly but surely, just by living in that space, and I'm sure yours will be the same, they're getting surrounded by it. It's the feel, it's the breath, it's the intake of the oxygen. They're the things that inspire them. And then it's just a case of, like you say, flipping the switch, getting them outdoors and doing those things. So I'm sure it's coming.
I think so. And look, they're both super curious, really capable girls, and and my wife's fantastic at teaching. And she's a better teacher than me with my kids, and so I'm trying to take a leaf out of her book. And I hope to think that my time will come with fires and shelters and snow caves and stuff. And yeah, that it's all to come, and I can't wait.
When it comes to human powered transport, obviously you've sort of done the paddling and then you're doing the walks and the runs. Are there other modems of transport that you're looking at in the future and you're thinking one day I would love to go and do that?
Yeah, look, sailing does interest me, but I think it's a bit sedentary sailing for me. I really want to use my arms and legs. I must
Yeah.
admit, I'm only just really learning what it's like to be an endurance runner. I've always done it, but I've never done it with any kind of strategy in a sense.
Hmm.
My early FKTs 10 or 12 years ago, they were kind of, I kind of got away with doing them because I could and not because I was great at them. Now I want to be great at them, and you have to be because I've got an aging body, so I have to be bloody
Mm,
strategic.
mm.
And so I'm kind of learning a new thing again, and I love it. The fact that I'm learning how to do this thing that is very natural for me, and yet I've never done it right. Um, so running, look, I'll continue to run because I think it's just great. I was saying earlier too for solo time, but in terms of some bike touring, some more mountaineering, I'd really love to get into the deep high mountains again, and I think I will. I've got a TV show that's going to come out early next year with Red Bull, and that's where I go and engage with the best Red Bull athletes in the world, and we go do stuff. And so there's been some really fun things happen over the last few months, and will continue to happen that are kind of wetting my whistle a bit, And you've only got to be around a Nora Newman or a Sasha DeJulian, these world class women paddler, rock climber, or Jeremy Hines, mountaineer skier, Tom Dodolado, a paraglider, these people that are just blow your mind with what they can do. And I spend 4 or 5 days with these people and do a watered down version of adventure and think, you know what, this is cool stuff.
Yeah,
I've just got to
yeah.
keep a lid on it because we're still little kids and Helen will divorce my ass. So I've got to just be sensible.
I think what you are. I mean, there's a guy, the personality in the UK called Tony Martin, ex motorbike motocross rider, did everything with adrenaline, pumped up, but he was the conduit of conversation, and he did exactly that. He went out and spoke to people and just engaged and heard their stories, and you could see him getting inspired by other people around him. I haven't been privy to any of the show that's coming up. I'm fascinated by the concept of it, but it seems like that's sort of your niche now. Is that you're almost sort of the Louis Theroux of the adventure world who can put a twist and conversation on it?
Yeah, or just I've sort of thought of it as being a contract storyteller because
Mm.
if there's one thing a lot of Red Bull athletes are bad at, it's telling their story verbally. Because in
Yeah.
many respects, their story is the kick-ass, amazing things they do physically. And
Yes.
they think, why do I don't want to sit around the couch all bloody day talking about this cool stuff. I want to be doing it. But that doesn't translate it well to an audience quite often. So you might need an in-betweener, maybe like myself, to come along, or a jack of all trades to come along and say, "Hey, look, let's slow down a little and unpack what you've done or what you're doing." And it's super interesting and
Mm.
fun. Yeah, it's going to be great.
Is it different being on that side of the camera to being the filmmaker and selecting the shot?
Very much so. Yeah, no longer. I've always directed my own pieces, and so having a director direct me, it's quite liberating in some respects because I just
You
have
are
to
the
do my own.
talent now, Bo. You are the talent, remember?
It seems whenever I read that on a sheet, I think this is weird. I'm like anti-talent. I'm just, um, but it's kind of fun because I just have to be an expert on me and an expert on the person I'm talking to, or really interested in the person I'm talking to, and then the rest is just talk in short sentences and be real, and it's quite liberating. It's fun.
It's amazing. This is why I love doing this. There is no reason apart from wanting to spend an hour of my own time talking to really interesting people who ultimately, after every show, the first thing I did before I talked to you, I suddenly went through the website again and I went, fuck me, I haven't even got his book yet. Oh my God. Ordered the book, put it straight through Booktopia, realized after I'd ordered it, it's being sent to my old address from 8 years ago in Brisbane. So now I was thinking, how do I do a Bow style adventure to claim that? Do I run up there and camp outside my old house until the book arrives? I was thinking about different ways to do this, you see.
I'd share that story on whatever socials I've got, mate. I'd share that. That's a ripper.
So when it comes to the gear that you use when you are out as a filmmaker, obviously everything's got smaller, everything's got more refined, everything's got easier to use. Do you have sort of the cameras? What are the cameras that you use? Are you a drone man? Are you a GoPro man?
I can do all of it, but I'm nowhere near as good a filmmaker and sorry, shot maker now as Mitch, my
Mm,
right hand man. So he's our DOP. He's a director of photography. So when he's on shoot, I know that he's just going to shoot the lights out with whoever we've got.
yeah.
My main job is to just be as real as I can in front of camera, but I'll always be the GoPro man. I mean, the last, probably 4 or 5 films in the last 12 or so, they've been entirely bow shot. And you can tell too, because they're all pretty either static or it's bow running through frame or whatever it might be. They tend to be a bit more stiff, those films, and not as well filmed. Um, but in terms of my go to, I mean, I just keep the GoPros keep getting better and smaller. I've got I use the 12 on a little mini tripod, and that is just my home beacon, and
Yeah,
it is so good for moving. I mean, we know this, right? What they are crap at is sound. So we've had to really we go through a different sort of sound protocol every couple of years, but we're now using tentacles, which seem to be bloody
yeah,
brilliant.
yeah.
So there's a few little tricks and I know a lot of new YouTubers, a lot of new filmmakers don't put enough emphasis on sound because they do so much of their narrative in post, and I think that's a real flaw.
Mm.
Even now, I know I'm sort of known for voiceover work, and I do that with great resistance because uh, I'd much rather not. I'd much rather talk in reality out there in the woods, but you just often don't have that sense of reflection. But yeah, you can't layer down enough natural voice out there, and you need to do it right. But yeah, otherwise, a big hat, good sunnies, and good sound. Make sure you got a big knob of sunscreen on your nose, and away you go.
I get the gut feeling you are a traditional filmmaker who likes to shoot everything in landscape for television rather than straight up for Insta
Oh,
reels.
mate, this
Yeah,
vertical thing,
doesn't it? Doesn't
it
it?
is so unnatural for me.
I know. It irks me every time. I go out and we just come back from Patagonia, the country, the part of the South America, and I had clients there, and we had two or three that were real old schools, and they had their phones horizontally the whole time, and then everyone else was vertical. And it was nice because I had a whole different, bunch of movie footage that I could use for different things. But it just still to me, that is a television screen. Shoot like a television screen.
Yeah, I shot tonight. I saw a bandicoot in my local patch of bush for the first time ever in my life, and I went down and shot it. I haven't put it up on socials yet, and I shot that vertically. And I actually thought when I ran off, I thought, "Geez, Bo, you just naturally shot that vertically. You need to go home and have a bloody hard talk to yourself,
Conversation with
mate.
yourself. Yeah, exactly.
Oh shit, what's happening?"
The new generation. Is there anyone you really want to work with? Are there people? Because you're obviously getting these sort of lovely offers now to go and do things out there. Is there someone that you could really see as being a future, co-host with you?
Look, I'd love. I mean, you mentioned Louis Theroux. I'd love to. I'd love to meet those sort of people, or people that aren't in my genre in terms of filmmaking, a Steven Soderbergh or a Wes Anderson, or one of those
Mm.
sort of people. Um, they fascinate me. But having done a few shoots recently that are larger crew, and when I say larger, like 20 people, that's a huge crew for me compared to two or three. I thought, geez, I don't know whether I want to be that person in a sense. But in terms of who I'd love to work with some comedians more, knowing just how fun they are and how much they'd love to do weird stuff too. I think it's good fodder. Um, but on the spot, no, I don't really have anyone for you other than to say, uh, yeah, uh, yeah, I don't know,
Yeah,
mate.
but no. That Australian
Yeah,
answer of
but
yeah, but no.
yeah, look, yeah. I suppose I think I said this earlier. I'm so full of I have like ten lifetimes worth of stuff. And
Mm.
so I actually kind of shut myself down whenever I come up with side projects now. So I just say, Bo, a side project is a bloody lot of work because it's twice the amount of think tank in there and people's opinion, and I'm kind of scared of that. I must admit, because I want to turn around a film every 21 days, and as soon as I invite someone in, it takes time.
You're pretty strict on that now, where you're sort of allotting your personal movie making too, to be able to give yourself the freedom for life and work and family outside of filmmaking.
Yeah, I'm getting better at it, but only by small margins. I need to be getting better at it quicker, I think, given how much Helen has to fill in the gaps with my obsessive compulsive bloody YouTube channel in a sense. And we've only just recently said, right, we've got to stick to the 21-day thing. There's a golden rule, Ben. I have enough friends in YouTube to know that consistency is kind of king in many respects, and I haven't been. Only outliers will do great on YouTube if they're inconsistent, and so and I'm not that person yet. I still need consistency, and we've got to try it in earnest.
How do you learn that? What is that? Because the analytics, obviously, of things like that are so crucial to making it more than just a hobby and turning it into a financial income stream. Have you got people out there that are sort of guiding you on all of the knowledge and the data?
No, no. In fact, to the contrary, Mitch is more involved. He reads more and listens to more podcasts on how to be a YouTuber and how to work the system in a sense. But
Yeah.
I've been around the traps enough and done workshops at Google, and um, I still have to just stay in my lane and be a person that shoots shit that interests me. I just have to
Mm,
do that in the purest form. Otherwise, nothing else matters.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
if you can imagine. Think of the musicians. Think of all your favorite musicians out there. Of course, they want to produce albums that are killer, but it is so hard. It is so
Mm,
hard to produce a killer song or a killer album one after another. The person has to go off and reinvent themselves every time, and that doesn't
yeah.
take 12 days or 27 days. It takes whatever it takes, right? So to roll into a 21-day formula is freaking hard, but I love the challenge of that too because it's possible. And so you just give it a go. So we'll see how that goes for the next year or so.
Two more things for you. It is a public holiday weekend this weekend in Queensland. If you were to challenge our listeners to go out and do one odd, crazy adventure this weekend, what might that be?
I say this to everyone, Ben. I get a lot of people request for me to tell people to do something particular on their birthday, and I go, it
Yeah.
doesn't really work like that. You need to take no prisoners. And the thing is, everyone's weird. I believe, Ben, everyone's weird, and we all think weird stuff. So I
Mm,
think people need to do the weird things they think, and
yeah.
that is like you making a staircase out of the thing, or writing to your old address to get a book and seeing where that takes them. I think you have to embrace the unknown, and that's there's so much beauty in it, but you got to trust yourself with it. So embrace the unknown, take no prisoners, do the weird stuff.
You remind me of a game I used to play when we were just passing our driving test in England. I was about 17 years old, and it was just simply the left right game. And we would drive and take the first left turn and the first right turn, and the first, I would see where we'd end up. Exactly
that's
like that. No formula whatsoever.
that's fantastic. I love that. I might steal that, and if I do, I'll credit you. That's really fun.
No problem. Have you got one bit of gear that has been with you for a long, long time, and you just love and you're passionate about, whether it's Leatherman or a watch or a compass, whatever it might be?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have had bits of things that I'm really loyal to, like cups and spoons and bowls, things that you use, tactile things that you're always using. Um, but I've tended to have them for like 5 or 6 years, and then something, and they drop to the
Yeah.
bottom of the ocean, or they
Mm,
whatever. Um, so no, I don't have something that's a lightning rod for me to answer you. I do have tools. I have a chisel that I've had since I was 19. That that is a very special chisel, simply to the point that I've lost it like 12 times and always found it.
comes
So
back.
that
The yo-yo tool.
it's
Love it.
kind of like the chisel that I can't get rid of. So it's my most pride and joy. So that's the best that I've got for you.
I was going to talk about lots of things, but our hour is well and truly up. I want to talk to you about the hip replacements because my little boy just read a book all about Grandpa's new hip, and then we happened to watch the hip replacement movie. But we've got to wrap it here. Beau, it's absolutely fascinating to dip into your world. Thank you for making it such an engaging, fascinating place to be. And from everybody at Wild Earth and us Wild Earthlings, thank you. I'm signing out.
Thank you, Ben. Good on you, mate.